Hey, you. Ever feel like keeping up with health advice is almost a full-time job?
Oh, definitely. Especially diet stuff. It changes so fast.
Right. It's just overwhelming sometimes, trying to figure out what's actually true. But, well, that's why we're here.
Exactly. And today we're tackling something with a bit of a kick-food, chili peppers, and what the science actually says about them and our health.
Yep. We've sifted through quite a bit, those big studies that pull together lots of smaller ones on mortality, heart health.
Meta-analyses and reviews.
Yeah, those. And articles on capsaicin itself, plus broader reviews looking at, well, the whole picture of spicy food's impact.
So our mission basically is to distill all that, pull out the key stuff, the really interesting bits.
Exactly. So you get the insights without needing a PhD afterwards.
Mm.
Okay, so let's start simple. What actually makes spicy food? Well, spicy.
Good question. It comes down to a compound called capsaicin. It's an oily substance in chili peppers.
Ah, okay.
And the amount of it determines the heat. You've probably heard of Scoville heat units, right? That scale.
Oh, yeah, the SHU scale. Seen that on hot sauce bottles.
That's the one. But capsaicin isn't just about heat. It has some pretty potent properties.
Like what? I mean, I've definitely seen those chili creams for sore muscles. Is that capsaicin?
That's exactly it. It has known pain-relieving effects, and it's also anti-inflammatory.
Oh,
So it's used topically, like in those creams, but also sometimes taken orally for conditions like arthritis or chronic pain.
seriously?
Yeah, in fact, there's even a prescription-strength topical capsaicin approved by the FDA for certain kinds of nerve pain.
Wow.
It works by essentially dulling the response of those pain-sensing nerve cells over time.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So it's not just some folk remedy. Are there other good things in chilies besides capsaicin?
Oh, absolutely. They contain other related compounds like dihydrocapsaicin and also things called phenolic
A
compounds.
malic, like antioxidants?
Exactly. They're known antioxidants. So, yeah, chilies pack more than just heat.
Okay, so we've got the heat source and some known uses. Let's get to the big question. Can eating spicy food actually help you live longer? I feel like I see headlines about that all the time.
Right, that's where things get really interesting. Several large studies, these big meta-analyses, have looked into this. Well, one suggested a potential link. Eating spicy chili foods regularly might be associated with a lower risk of dying from cardiovascular causes and also dying from, well, any cause, all-cause mortality.
Okay, potential link.
And that finding lines up with another big review, which also noted a connection between eating spicy food and reduced mortality risk.
That does sound promising. Were there, like, specific numbers? How much lower risk are we talking?
Yeah, some studies tried to quantify it. One review found that people eating spicy foods 6 or 7 days a week had about a 14% lower relative risk of all-cause mortality compared to those who ate it less than once a week.
14%. Wow.
Another review found something similar, around a 12% lower risk associated with regular consumption. And there were also hints of reduced deaths, specifically from heart disease and strokes linked to chili intake.
Okay, those numbers are definitely attention-grabbing. So, should we all start loading up on hot sauce? Could it actually make us live longer?
Well, here's the crucial caveat. These are mostly observational studies showing a correlation and association.
Ah, right. Correlation isn't causation.
Exactly. People who eat spicy food regularly might have other lifestyle factors that contribute to their longevity. Maybe their overall diet is different or they exercise more. Who knows? It's complex.
Okay.
But the fact that multiple large studies are pointing in a similar direction, that makes it really interesting and definitely worth investigating further.
For sure. Something to keep an eye on. Okay, moving on. Another hot topic. Sorry.
Mm.
Weight management. You always hear about foods that supposedly boost your metabolism. Does spicy food fall into that category?
It certainly comes up in that conversation. There's actually quite a bit of research looking at capsaicin's potential anti-obesity effects.
Oh, really? Like what?
Well, some clinical studies found that taking capsaicinoids, which are like milder versions of capsaicin, less burny,
Okay.
was linked to losing abdominal fat and also keeping fat burning elevated.
So even the less intense stuff might help.
Seems possible. And research on capsaicin itself suggests it might increase energy expenditure, how many calories you burn.
Hmm.
It might also raise body temperature slightly and boost fat oxidation, the process of breaking down fat. Some studies even hint it could suppress appetite, making you eat less overall.
But wait, I feel like I've heard conflicting things too, like maybe it doesn't help or could even backfire.
That's a fair point. The evidence isn't totally one-sided. While some studies show these potential benefits, others have found mixed results.
Right.
And there are even some observational studies that linked higher chili consumption with a greater risk of obesity in certain populations. So, yeah, it's not clear-cut.
It's so confusing. How might it actually work, though? Like, biologically?
Okay, so looking at preclinical studies, usually in animals, researchers have seen capsaicin do things like stop new fat cells from forming
Wow.
and also lower triglyceride levels in the blood. The proposed mechanisms are pretty cool, things like stimulating the sympathetic nervous system,
Fight or flight.
sort of, yeah, and activating brown adipose tissue, or BAT. That's the good fat that burns energy to create heat.
Ah, brown fat. Heard about that.
Right. And another really interesting angle is its effect on gut bacteria. Some studies suggest it might increase levels of a beneficial bacteria called Akkermansia muciniphila.
Gut bacteria, too. Man, it's all connected. What did the big review say about metabolism overall?
Good question. One large review found what they called moderate quality evidence that taking capsicum supplements might help with body weight and lowering LDL cholesterol, the bad kind.
Okay, so some benefit there.
But importantly, it didn't find strong links with other metabolic markers like triglycerides, HDL cholesterol, total cholesterol, blood sugar, insulin, or HbA1c.
I see. So maybe some specific effects, but not a magic bullet for overall metabolic health based on current evidence.
That seems to be the takeaway for now. More solid research is needed.
Okay, let's shift gears to something more serious. Cancer. This is where I've seen really contradictory headlines. What did the research we looked at show?
Yeah, this is probably the most complex area and honestly a bit concerning in some ways. The big umbrella review we looked at highlighted these contrasts.
How so?
It actually reported direct association correlations again between higher spicy food intake and an increased risk of certain cancers. Esophageal, stomach, and gallbladder.
Increased risk. Wow, okay.
Yeah, particularly for stomach cancer, this link seems stronger with moderate to high pepper consumption, especially in studies on Asian populations. One analysis even suggested their relationship wasn't linear, meaning the risk didn't just climb steadily with more spice.
That's definitely sobering.
Yeah.
But then you also hear about capsaicin maybe fighting cancer.
No. Exactly. That's a paradox. There's a whole separate line of research, mostly lab-based studies on cells or animals, exploring capsaicin as a potential anti-cancer agent.
Right.
These studies show it can inhibit the growth of various cancer cells in vitro and in vivo. So how do you square that circle?
Yeah. How?
Well, one hypothesis is that capsaicin's effect on cancer might be dose-dependent. Maybe low doses have one effect, high doses another, or it could depend on the type of cancer or the person. It's even been suggested that in certain contexts, capsaicin might act as a co-carcinogen, something that doesn't cause cancer on its own, but could potentially help it along under specific circumstances.
A co-carcinogen. That sounds pretty worrying. Could there be other explanations for the link found in those population studies?
Definitely. One factor sometimes mentioned is contamination. Some spices or spicy foods, especially if not stored properly, can be contaminated with things like aflatoxins.
Ah, those mold toxins, right.
Yeah.
Known carcinogens.
Exactly. So it might not be the capsaicin itself, but something else tagging along. It just underscores how much more research is needed to untangle this really complex relationship.
It really does sound like a very mixed picture for cancer. Okay, before we wrap up, what about everyday concerns? Like, does spicy food give you heartburn or GERD?
Interestingly, the umbrella review suggested there wasn't strong evidence that spicy food worsens GERD specifically.
Okay, that's surprising.
But that being said, common sense applies. While it's generally safe in moderation for most people, spicy food can absolutely cause discomfort for sensitive individuals.
Yeah, I can attest to that sometimes.
Right. Things like heartburn, that burning throat feeling, nausea, getting flushed or sweaty, runny nose, belching, even diarrhea or constipation for some.
So it really depends on the person.
Totally. And some studies even reported less common side effects. Things like leg cramps, weird bowel habits, skin rashes, that burning mouth sensation, or even hives. And one really important point. High-dose supplements of capsaicin could potentially interact with certain medications.
Like?
Things like anticoagulants, blood thinners, also diabetes, meds, aspirin, and some asthma drugs like theophylline.
Good to know.
Which is why, if you're thinking about taking capsaicin supplements, definitely talk to your doctor first. Don't just start popping pills.
Absolutely crucial advice.
Oh.
Okay, so let's try and pull this all together. What are the main takeaways from our deep dive today?
Okay, summing up. Capsaicin, the key player in chili peppers, is clearly a powerful compound. It definitely has established benefits for pain relief.
Mm,
There's also some really intriguing, though not fully conclusive, evidence hinting at benefits for metabolism and potentially lowering the risk of dying prematurely.
right.
But the story with cancer is much more complicated, with some studies suggesting increased risk with high intake, while others explore anti-cancer potential. We really need more research there.
Yeah, that seems clear. And the overall message feels like moderation and knowing yourself.
Exactly that. For most people, enjoying spicy food as part of a balanced diet is fine, maybe even beneficial in some ways, but it comes down to individual tolerance and not overdoing it.
Right.
And, that leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you listening. Given how complex and sometimes contradictory these findings are, how do you think our own individual bodies, our unique diets, might interact with these effects?
Mm, that's a great question.
It's a good reminder that nutrition science isn't always one size fits all. It might be worth reflecting on your own experiences with spicy food and maybe keeping a critical, curious eye on future research as it emerges.